Hey everyone, I'm Coach Wolverine,
Coach Kelowna.
and this is another conversation over drinks.
Today we are going to talk about the consideration of intent when it comes to being uncomfortable. And what I mean is we discussed being sensitive, being triggered, being this, being that. When we start getting into arguments or discussing anything in regards to a conflict, we have to consider the intent. And the reason being is there's a communication divide if one person's angry and one person didn't mean anything by it, versus having malicious intent, which is like, I'm going to directly say something that's offensive to you or is to hurt you or anything like that, in which case is so much, like, there's so much worse behind that. And like,
Man, intention is my number one rule. And I believe firmly the intention is everything. And yeah, when we're triggered, it's up to us to be like, ooh, okay, this didn't feel good. Why didn't feel good? And then expressing ourselves in that matter. Be like, hey, what you said didn't feel good. Did you mean it that way or did you mean it this way? But when's the last time anybody's ever asked that of you?
Pretty good at avoiding those conversations, to be totally honest. But when you get involved, like typically it ends up happening online.
Yeah.
Or with people that are really close to you, right? So
Or text message. That literally drives me insane.
you got to use more emojis and GIFs.
Oh my goodness. Like, getting a text message from somebody that you don't even know and then being upset by it and be like, well, they sound angry. And it says, hi, how are you? How do you know it's angry? Like, you're putting an expectation that a person is supposed to be using all of these things. It's like, or you just take it at surface level and wait to have those heavy conversations in person.
I've actually responded with, hey, read that in a really bad tone.
Yeah, I've done that too.
I'll literally
actually
say, like, I read that in my head in a really poor tone. Was that the intention? And like, if they know me, because they know I'll have that conversation with them. If they don't, they'll be like, that's a little weird. But I'm like, that's a legit question. So I'm either going to respond with equal or more tension because I don't know you, or like whatever, right? Like it's one of those things, but the intent is so crucial. And even when you're having an argument, like if you're having an argument with someone that's significant in your life, I don't believe there's ever a time where malicious intent is okay.
No, never. I don't. I believe it's always, regardless of how we feel in here, our intentions outwards should always still be pure, right? It's kind of that number one rule of treat others how you want to be treated. And, I like to think I try and abide by that for the most part. But the other aspect of that too that I want to address before we go too down just intention is the world just is. Yeah. Whether or not it's good or bad is perceived through the lens of how we currently are.
And that's our perception, right? Which is why, I mean, for me, that's why every client I have, I won't even work with unless they're willing to get a journal and do gratitude work.
Right.
So, and some of them don't do it, which I find so funny because it's like 30 seconds a day. But it's like, okay, well, guess what you're going to do all week? Send me your gratitude list every morning. They do that for a week and they're like, okay, this is actually really easy. But it's not, and we don't do that because of our bad days, right? Like, or we don't do that because of our good days. Like if you're having a good day, it's easy to be grateful. But if we practice doing it on our bad days, or we practice doing it when we're upset or angry, it transcends into these conversations because you can pull yourself out of anger, frustration.
But it's easier to identify with those negative emotions, right? So when we're sitting in that yuck and we're told that we need to pull ourselves out of this yuck, if we were to sit down and do gratitude, it's very hard for us to hold on to the narrative that we're still in yuck, right? So then we are intentionally stepping out of the discomfort.
Yeah.
But it might not be the narrative that our ego wants to be telling ourselves right now.
This is why it takes work.
Absolutely.
And practice. We
100%.
call it a practice. And I totally agree, right? For some people, it's more meditative, right? For me, it's more like I just need it. I have it prompted on my phone every morning now. This thing has been actually amazing for me tracking everything. Mm-hmm. I wake up, I check my recovery. It won't even let me look at my data until it's like, how was yesterday? Did you take your creatine? Did you take your vitamins? Did you take this? Did you do this? Here's your journal.
Basically, your daily checklist of...
Immediately.
Yeah.
So if I want to see how my recovery data is, because I'm a geek, I have to do my journal entry. So the little things, right? You learn how to manipulate your environment. We've talked about that extensively. The gratitude thing is just one of the easiest to me.
I think gratitude is the gateway to all of it. It really is.
It's the positive negative, right? It's like
Yeah.
if I'm grateful, I can find a solution. If I'm angry, it's going to be focusing on the problems, and then problems just inherently make more problems. So, and then it just and then avoiding them is the other thing, right? Like we can have good intentions by avoiding problems or white lies, if you want to call them that.
Yep.
But the intentions don't match the integrity of it all, right? Because that, if our goal is to get to an end result, which is a solution,
Yep.
avoiding is not actually in the best interest of me, the other person, anyone at all.
Right. I want to explore the other side of that though too a little bit.
Yeah,
so on the receiving aspect of intention. So on our triggers, right? So I got this scenario actually that I use with my clients all the time, and it's to say that I put them in this position. So say it's a client that's wanting to say lose some weight, right? And I haven't seen them forever, and I'm at the gym, and they come into the gym, and I can physically see that they have lost a lot of weight. So I'm like, wow, man, good job. You're looking really small. There's two main ways that this person can take it, right? Either of, oh, thanks, I've lost a lot of weight. Thank you, I appreciate that. Or, what do you mean I'm looking small? I've been training really hard, like my muscles are growing, right? My intention was pure as a compliment.
Yeah.
How he received it, I was through the filter of a trigger, right? So this is where it's also on the flip side of the intention for us and our triggers. It's also important to be aware of that light bulb going off and be like, okay, why did I feel that? Why did I receive this way? Because if we are in a state of yuck, it doesn't matter how cheery or rainbows and unicorns this person is floating over you to give you a compliment, we're still going to potentially receive it the wrong way. And unfortunately, what I see is too much of society is geared towards that way of like, my happiness is now your responsibility because heaven forbid you trigger me, right? It's your problem, which is not the case.
Which I think is funny too, because I have there's being considerate in a sense.
Yeah.
There's being kind, which we've talked about again
Absolutely.
extensively. If you're being considerate, kind with good intentions, and someone has a problem, that's on them.
But that's exactly it. So when we are in that position of them, is why are we finding ourselves in that position? And it's keeping ourselves mindful in that moment of like, man, I received this poorly, but did they actually mean it poorly? And then communicating, hey, this is how I received that comment. Did you actually mean it that way? Or is my internal system just being a butthead?
Yeah, exactly, right? And to take it back to the texting thing, it's like, I will say, hey, I read that in a really bad tone. Whether we want to unpack why that's happening now or later, or I can do that on my own, it's probably past conversations that have been similar in wording, et cetera, blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely.
Is the biggest thing, right? Like, if you can openly say, like, hey, that sounded like this to me. You may have not meant it that way. Just tell me that you didn't mean it that way, right?
Yeah.
Other problem is that that's happening all of the time. You shouldn't have to be reassuring someone.
No.
Endlessly. That is, again, hey, it's time for some reflection.
And that's back on the other side of the intention of, nobody wants to be like, yes, I meant that with wholesome, all of the love vibes. Yeah. As like, nobody wants to justify the why behind they said what they said. But then that's a deeper conversation of, is this a person you still want to have in your life? If you have to continuously defend what you're saying because of how they're receiving it.
It becomes draining, right? And that's where you need to know the person and trust the person and like be involved in that. Like if you, I'd like to think anyone that's known me long enough knows I'm not going to say anything with malicious intent. I'm not going to like do anything that way because like why would I want to hurt someone? It doesn't anyone any good. It
doesn't serve us at all.
At all. Not in what we're trying to do, in the lifestyle we live, and the people we have around us. Like we know it's going to hurt us and them. So like a double negative doesn't.
So here's another standard of it, the unintentional intent though. Okay, so this is actually a real scenario I went through a couple weeks ago where I had went for a coffee chat with an old friend of mine.
Yeah.
And we meet up for coffee. He was super happy that I had reached out, and he had told me that if I didn't reach out, he probably wouldn't have reached out at all. And I'm like, well, like, why? Like, do you not like me anymore? It wasn't that at all. It was the fact that because a lot of our conversations we have are all based around like personal growth and development and whatnot. And over the last couple months, he hadn't been showing up in the way that him and I had talked about him wanting to show up. He felt embarrassed of that. So he thought that because I'm a coach, that I was going to have a poor opinion of him and judge him because he hasn't been doing personal work. So he chose that he was not going to reach out to hang out with me because he had the fear that I was going to judge him for not doing what he said he was going to do. But here's the thing. As a coach, it's actually our job to do personal work and development. It's our job. So how I look at that is that would be like if you were a mechanic, not talking to you about mechanics because I'm afraid that you are going to judge me because my knowledge of mechanics is less than yours, right? And so it was a very interesting position to be in that, so like he was placing judgment before me or towards me that I was going to judge him purely because of what we do. When in hindsight, it's like,
it's
no,
flip,
man,
right?
like talk to me. I'm here for you for that stuff. I want to see everyone succeed just the same as you want to see everyone succeed, right? And so it's like if we ever catch ourselves in that feeling of fearing of what are they going to judge us for, and fearing of trying to control what we believe their intentions are going to be, we have to do some self-reflecting there and be like, what is going on inside of ourselves to have that fear?
Embarrassment's a tough one because it's one of those things that like there's no point in your life where you've been embarrassed as a kid that it's been like good.
No.
like there is no
I
point where
remember the red face.
the red face, the getting called out. I remember I was in kindergarten and I got called out by a kindergarten teacher because I said something I was a little rude. Obviously, I'm like 5, so I'm probably a little dickhead. But like she called me out in front of the whole class, and I'm going to remember that for my entire life.
Oh yeah.
So, and it's like that was uncomfortable.
And that's a core memory for you too.
But when you look at that from a lens of positivity, right? Like it's like, hey, I want to go find my kindergarten teacher and say thank you, right? Because that's a lesson that I may not have learned at the moment because I was 5 and a little bit of a dick.
But you felt that feeling, and
but
you don't want to feel it again.
And you know it's there, right? And you learn from that, and you can hark back to that. And like, there's little moments, but like the few times where you're hyper embarrassed, and a lot of it, like if you didn't get to play sports growing up, there's embarrassing moments in sports all the time. You do dumb stuff, you fall down, you make a really bad play, you have expectations, you don't meet them at all. Those are all embarrassing feelings, but you get to encapsulate those in sports, and they translate outwards. So it's like we get to learn how to deal with being embarrassed in a very isolated environment.
You ever score on your own net?
Yeah. Not like I never like walked up to my own net. Well, at least I don't remember going up to my own net and like shooting to score. But you tip it in, right? And you feel bad, or like it goes off your skate, and you're like, man.
But like that crash, right? You get it. Whether it's hockey, whether basketball, you get a score, and you're like, yeah, and you turn around, and you're like, no.
It's so dejecting, right? Like it's one of those things, but again, it's an isolated environment where outside of your 12 teammates and the parents that are way too into an 8-year-old soccer game is like
it's just a bunch of seagulls chasing a piece of bread in forms of human and a soccer ball.
Like nobody's that embarrassment gets just so like it's just one time, right? And the whole like and you just think like you can get stuck with a nickname for years going through school, right? Because kids, but the minute kids decide like and realize that doesn't matter, it's gone. Yeah. So you just need to learn how to deal with the embarrassment. It sucks because when you get older, you don't really get embarrassed because you start to own your stuff. A, you start to own your stuff. B, you stop stepping out of your comfort zone, which is terrible. So like you have a flip side to that.
Yeah. So you start owning it, but the owning things that you have to own it become lesser because most of us don't do that personal development stuff. It's an interesting catch-22 there.
Absolutely. But embarrassment is it's a big one.
Absolutely.
Right? Because like as a coach, like if you're coaching a team, you have to be very selective with who you're going to be, like, are they going to handle this okay? Right? And like, again, I look back to my kindergarten teacher and I was like, good for you. Like,
Yep.
But like my parents would have been like throwing her high fives. So like, but that is what it is, right? And you got to make that call. So I think with embarrassment, I just wanted to kind of take a segue to that. But it's one of the ones that it's such a big key thing, and that's going to stick with a lot of people. But it is, I would argue, one of the most uncomfortable. Like being sad is uncomfortable, being upset is uncomfortable, being angry, frustrated is uncomfortable. But being embarrassed is like a whole nother thing.
I'd say shame is up there with embarrassment.
So they kind of
they are very similar, just different roots, but very similar. Because I know that's exactly why, you know, from one of our previous conversations talking about integrity is that feeling of shame. I've felt that shame. I don't like feeling that shame. I really don't. And I remember as a kid doing something that my parents either specifically said don't do, and then I did it anyways. And that feeling of shame was like, I will never do this again. Ever. Actually, you know, full disclosure, transparency, I have a story that a lot of men might actually relate with this one, but I remember the first time that I seen adult entertainment when I was about 11, 12 years old.
way too young every time.
And I remember watching it, and I felt so guilty and shameful about it. Like I couldn't sleep that. I slept none that night. I went to school the next day and was just in this weird space. I had to tell my mom. I could not move forward without telling her, and because of that shame. And it just, yeah, I don't like it. So I just try and avoid situations to not put myself to feel that emotion.
100%. But again, we take it back to if we operate with good intent, and we never want to be maliciously hurtful to anyone else and anything like that, then we make better decisions. And we eliminate.
Absolutely.
We don't eliminate, but we definitely limit the amount of times we are going to feel shame or we are going to feel embarrassment, because we're operating on like our moral lines and all those things, and we know who we are and what we want to be and where we want to go.
Yep.
So that's again why having a purpose, having goals, having all these things that we've discussed are so important. Like if you don't have a direction that you want to head in, and at the end of the day you can't really look at it and be like, all right, did I live with intent today?
Yep.
And it's no, then you're literally just like emotionally, you're gonna ride on emotions all day long. Had a good day, I'm gonna do good things. Had a bad day, I'm gonna do bad things. Like, you don't know what today has in store. And like, you can have that argument where people are like, oh, they're just free-spirited, blah, blah, blah. That's not, like, they're high energy, and that's different, because they like to bounce around, but their intent is to run on high energy and do things integrally.
Yep.
And so it's just like, it's such a crazy thing. Like, you can look at people who are like, I'm having a bad day, I'm doing nothing. And it's okay to take a you day, which we talked about, but it's like,
there's a difference between taking a you day and then just like
waking up feeling bad and being like, yeah, I'll just not.
Yeah.
Like, there's things I need to do, I'm not gonna do them.
Yeah. There's a very, very big difference there. So yeah, on that side of the coin, all of the intention stuff, super important. It's literally the driving force. But then on the flip side of that same coin is feeling the triggers from somebody else's intention. It's our insecurities and triggers are our responsibility to deal with.
Take it home, run it through the filter.
Once I learned that, it literally was a life-freeing thing. It's like our triggers and insecurities are our responsibility, and we cannot hold the expectation that the rest of the world is going to tiptoe around us to ensure that we do not get triggered.
What did we say the other day? It was like, we just put it on a t-shirt, we're making jokes.
Oh, what was it? I'm offended, my problem. You're offended, your problem.
Not my problem or your problem. Basically, that's how it works, right? If you're offended and it wasn't my intent to offend you, it is your problem. Yep. And that's like, hey, that's just the reality of what is.
Yep, absolutely.
And if you constantly want to make things other people's problem, then we can talk about that another day, I think.
Another day, or give us a call. We can have a coaching session over it too.
100%. If you find 1,000 reasons why you can't do something and you can't find one why you should, that's probably a good time to have a chat with someone who's designed to find solutions.
Yeah.
It's real easy to come up with negatives.
Absolutely, it is. Absolutely, it is. It is super ridiculously hard to own places where.
For long periods of time, I've been there.
Yeah.
And they weren't fun.
No, definitely not fun. But on that note, that's all I got for this one.
That's it. I think mind your intent, be aware of others' intent, and don't do anything with ill intent.
Perfect sum up. That's it for today, guys. Please like, share, subscribe on whatever platform you're consuming this content on. And until next time, take care. Cheers.